Matthew Idoke emerges as the candidate of the Edo PDP in the primaries organized by the Senator Alimodu Sheri's faction of the party. Perhaps a second candidate we've seen from the party in the past days. And Deputy Senate President cries out for help, writes to the United Nations, to the European Union, the US and other international organizations over the alleged forgery of the Senate standing rules, claims there is a plot to silence him. And that's our focus on the program. Many thanks for joining in, everyone. I'm Sheung Wakimbale. Let's begin tonight with the hanging elections in hopes of having them completed by INEC. All inconclusive elections in Rivers, Imo, Kano, and Kogi states are to be concluded before July the 31st, 2016. This was revealed by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, at a second quarterly meeting with resident electoral commissioners in Abuja. He also announced the Commission's readiness to conduct the end-of-tenure governorship elections in Edo and Ondo State, adding that 100,000 persons registered in both states during the recently concluded continuous voter registration exercise.
We have started the processes of consultation, which will lead to the final determination of the exact dates, not later than the 31st of July, for the conclusion of the elections in the 4 states I mentioned, with a meeting of the political parties. And yesterday, we met with the security agencies. Today, it is the turn of the resident electoral commissioners, and then tomorrow, we'll have the National Stakeholders Forum.
And from that story coming from INEC to some partisan politics, where a former Labour Party and DPP candidate in the past governorship elections in Delta State, Mr. Great Ogboru, has abandoned his former parties to join the All Progressives Congress APC. Mr. Ogboru, alongside some chieftains of the party in Delta State, were at the party's national headquarters in Abuja, where the leadership of the party received the new members from the oil-rich Niger Delta State. The men are confident that with the renewed force coming up in the alliance that they've just formed, they're sure the APC will win in the next governorship election in Delta State.
We have been in discussion with opposition political heavyweights in Delta State, whom we know if they join hands with us, Delta Government House Asaba will be our own in 2019. Today, therefore, we have a main mission to present to you these high-profile opposition leaders, heavyweights, and juggernauts. We have thought to make a list, but it is at this point that I will present them. The first person, the first group I want to present is a man that you know so well, sir. His name is the one and only General, the People's General, Great Ogboru.
Line of labor has always been APC. And we can assure you, Mr. Chairman, that you now have the biggest party in Delta State.
I'm glad that you expressed the sentiment of getting back into the fold. Some of those who are not here today, I can remember quite a few names. And I want to assure you that we will do everything we can. Yeah, I know Victor J. will shake his head. I know what. We'll do everything we can to get them back into the mainstream of the new Delta APC.
Well, now, that's it. Some of these politics is a game of numbers where when you have one number being shaken up to the other, well, you can just imagine how interesting the game will look in Delta State. Well, let's now bring you some of the other top political stories we're following right now.
Political roundup on Channels Television. Here are your top political stories this time.
And the streets of Ekiti again came alive with what has recently become a common sight: protests. Today, the State Assembly lawmakers took their plenary to the streets. They were seen with placards in protest of what they called harassment of the governor, Fayose, after his bank accounts were frozen by the anti-graft agency, the EFCC. The lawmakers say they were prepared for arrest, and that's why they have carried bags. They insist the anti-graft agency doesn't have the right to freeze the bank accounts of a sitting governor. They allege the plans of the opposition party to remove Governor Fayose.
We are solidly behind him. Nothing, nobody, no amount of any distraction can change our stand.
As the pains of unpaid salaries bite harder in several states, governments are making efforts to streamline spending and block leakages. In Kwara State, Governor Abdul Fattah Ahmed has vowed to deal with any civil servant found working with fake results. He also threatened to prosecute anyone involved in collecting salaries not due to him, as the practice has been hampering and partly responsible for delay in the payment of salaries. The governor condemns the practice of ghost workers collecting salaries of non-existing workers, saying that if caught, they will be sacked and made to return the loot.
Well, when I'm sanctioned, it is very clear. The first one is refund money. You have collected legally. The second one is to be prosecuted.
Meanwhile, in Ondo State, Governor Olusegun Mimiko has failed to convince labor unions to call off the several weeks of strike. Talks between the Ondo State government and the labor leaders in the state have ended in a deadlock, as both parties weren't able to come to terms on ending the one-month-old industrial action embarked upon by the workers. The meeting, which lasted several hours behind closed doors, couldn't save the day. The government team, led by the State Head of Civil Service, Toyin Akikotu, and the State Commissioner for Finance, Yele Ogundikwe, is proposing paying 1 month out of the 6 months owed the workers.
We are working out some details and modalities, but of course we cannot make full disclosure at this time.
So we are still negotiating. So we are adjourned till Thursday 10 a.m.
And you're up to date. Those are your top political stories you need to know.
Thank you so much for staying with us on the program. Well, let's now begin tonight's discussions with the development on the alleged forgery of the Senate standing rules. The Deputy Senate President, Senator Ekiti, has written to several foreign organizations for help. Well, let me quickly show you a portion of what he has written to the United Nations, the United States, and the European Union. According to Senator Ekiti, and I quote, he said, "You may also wish to judge for yourself whether this trial orchestrated against me is not a political trial, calculated to witch hunt, barefaced intimidation, and a clear attempt to emasculate the parliament and silence me as the leader and the highest ranking member of the opposition in Nigeria." But again, we know that this is a second response coming from members of the Senate. The Senate President has also written just the same day that the trial went to court, but now the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Babachi Alawa, has responded to all of this. You remember that the President himself also responded to all of this with the presidency coming out to reply to the Senate President on the issue of the government within government. Let me quickly show you what the Secretary to the Government of the Federation said. He said, and I quote him now, he said, "A case of forgery is usually preferred against individuals. This is not different, as was the case with a former Speaker of the House of Representatives who was accused of certificate forgery. What he did was to resign honorably. The matter did not even go to court. In that particular case, it was never orchestrated as a matter for the National Assembly. The individual involved did not drag the entire legislature into the matter. Meanwhile, the separate statements by the Senate President and his deputy are indeed contradictory. While Senator Saraki believes Mr. President has abdicated his powers and that a cabal is in charge of federal administration, Senator Ekiti says President Buhari has become a dictator. End of quote. Those are some of the back and forth that we're getting from the two arms, major players in the two arms of government. But we'll dig deep into this matter when we return from this break. Stay with us.